Hi, Changemakers. It's me, Mo Berkner-Boyd. I want to dig into the human side of change. I want to have real conversations with the people who are doing the messy work of leading change and not burning people out in the process. I'm going to go deep with some of the best change and integration leaders about what's working. We'll wonk out on the data, weave in the neuroscience, and work through the challenges. Welcome to the Make or Break podcast. Today, we have the godfather of talent optimization, Matt Poepsel, joining us. We talked to Matt about so many things: what the grocery store can tell us about the state of human connection, how a trip to the junkyard changed a team, and how attention to the bigger picture might just help us all lead through change. Let's get to it. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Make or Break, a podcast at the intersection of disruption and people. I'm really fired up to have Matt Poepsel joining us today. Matt and I feel like every time we talk, I wish it was being recorded. So I'm glad this one is, Matt. Matt is a PhD, and he's the author of Expand the Circle, Enlightened Leadership for Our New World of Work. It's on my bookshelf back there. And the host of Lead the People podcast. He serves as VP and godfather of talent optimization for the Predictive Index. Matt's a smarty pants. He holds a PhD, an MBA, and a Harvard Biz School Certificate of Management Excellence. Matt's also a part-time faculty member at Boston College. He teaches grad courses in leadership, HR, and business spirituality. Matt is a U.S. Marine, an Ironman triathlon finisher, and a student of Buddhist philosophy. Matt, I feel like this is a start of a good joke, like a Buddhist and a U.S. Marine walk into a bar, and then it's like, wait, it's the same guy. Matt, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Mo, it's such a pleasure. I'm honored to be with you today. I can't wait to have our conversation.
So I want to dive right in here. What led us to today, Matt? We are at record levels of loneliness at work, of disengagement, of change fatigue, burnout. How do we get here?
Yeah, I think it's really an acceleration of a lot of disruptive forces that have been in the works for a long time. I think sometimes if you look at the headlines today, there's a lot of talk about AI, for example. And then we don't realize that AI was been around since at least the 1950s. But when everything ripens, It's like, oh, man. And it's just an acceleration, like I said, of so many things that have really been affecting us on so many levels. I've seen things such as personalization. Have you ever noticed that when you look at your social media feed or your Netflix recommendations are very different from mine? You know, that didn't used to happen when we would all, I saw a statistic, it said 90% of America watched the last episode of MASH on live when it aired. Those types
I'm old enough to remember that, Matt. Like, I'm old enough that we all made sure that we were tuned in, there were tears.
That's right. And so what happened the next day? Everybody couldn't stop talking about it. But now, the least favorite question I get all the time, oh, have you seen this show? Are you watching this show? The answer is no. Stop asking, because there's so many shows. There's so much content. And so we don't have the overlap of shared experiences either. So I think it all adds up to this notion that we're fragmenting. We're not having the same level of connective overlap that we used to. It's not a judgment in any way. It's just to say that things have accelerated.
You know, when you and I were chatting before, there was something that really struck me. You said, every time you have a package delivered to your house, it's another time that you weren't out having a conversation with, you weren't going into a shop somewhere. You were behind your computer, you were alone, and I think the system is designed now. And I believe I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the research you're doing around this, really to pull us apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that in order to help us get through our busy lives, a lot of times we've developed these modern conveniences. So whether it is having groceries delivered, for example, I don't have groceries delivered that much anymore. Some of my favorite experiences are when I go to the grocery store. I'm out in town, and sometimes I'll see a worker and I'll ask my favorite question, what's your favorite thing about your job? Because I love leaving people just a little bit better, and hearing them relate sort of things that they like about helping customers, find just the perfect product, whatever it might be. But I think that when you look at how much convenience has been wired in for us, I don't think we've necessarily done the calculus on what it's costing us in terms of connection. So I don't think it's a surprise that as conveniences have increased, right now, so is loneliness and isolation. The Surgeon General had declared an epidemic of loneliness.
Yeah.
And I think it's because the conveniences have this byproduct sometimes that we're feeling more disconnected than ever. When you survey young people, for example, they say what they're really looking for is belonging. They're looking for connection. They're looking for it at work, yes. They're looking for it outside of work, yes. And I think it's a direct counter clash to this nature of a very sort of machined experience that we can have, right? And in some cases need to have, because if we have two incomes and we're working around the clock and we need those conveniences just to get through. But I think we also do need to pause and understand necessarily what it's doing in terms of pulling us apart a little bit.
You maybe just realized, Matt, why when I go to the grocery store, I hate going through the self-checkout. Mm-hmm. And normally now there's only like 2 lanes. Like I could go to the grocery store and live in my bubble too. But I will stand in line to go through a lane, and there are a couple people that I just love. Like, what's happened with you this week? Do you know what I mean? They're my favorite checkout people. And I'm willing to stand for 5 minutes because I want to hear their story. I want to connect with them. I don't want to be in this bubble. And so I think that's really interesting, because even if I chose to go to the grocery store, I could still have a solo experience if I so chose, because of automation that's happened.
Yeah, I love the grocery store example. It's such a good one. And sometimes you'll see that line who's really long for the self-checkout. Even then you see some people standing around sometimes waiting to help others that might need help. So it's all kind of like, it's again, not a judgment, but just saying that we're observing these things. I remember I was checking out one time and I asked the woman her favorite thing about her job. And she said that she really likes having a little bit of extra income. And she was an older person. And she said to me, I live on a fixed income now, but I come in and I'd like to be able to make a little bit of extra money because I might want to replace my iPad. And I thought, what? That's fabulous. I love that. That's so great. I did not expect that response. And then I saw a young man and he was bringing in the carts, but I noticed that he had his AirPods in. And when you're working in that environment, what are you saying to the public, to your customers, when you have your AirPods in? So I'm like, it's all fascinating. Just, we don't have to go far to observe what's happening to us, but I think it often goes unnoticed. And that's why I'm really trying to keep my eyes open to see the sort of downstream implications of a lot of these trends. Yes, in the workplace, but even beyond, even in our relationships. Some of the other research that I've been doing is around, geographically speaking, where do we live relative to our extended family? And there was a time when families lived relatively nearby, and now
or in the same house or
same
apartment,
house, same neighborhood, at least the
Yeah.
same town. And now a lot of times when we follow the work, we end up miles and miles away. And we say, well, I can get on a plane whenever I want, or I can just hop on FaceTime. But not quite the same. So I think there's been this constant, no matter where you look in the research, what you'll find is that there have been changes and trends, many of which are technologically driven, some of which are societally driven. But what you find is that the scarce resource now is connection. Everything is kind of designed to satisfy our individual needs, and our overlap, our collective needs, are the ones that are sort of at a premium now. And I think that's why I say that we've entered an entropy economy. What's happened is all these forces I've been talking about are entropic in nature. They tend to cause drift. They tend to cause separation. And now the very engine of what we do to produce value in society starts to exacerbate that a little bit. So that's, again, the entropy economy is a very real thing. And I think it's going to become the defining challenge of our age.
Boy, and I appreciate your call to pay attention to what we're doing to intentionally create connection in our own lives. And I can't wait for your research to come out and to be able to read. And y'all, I will say, follow Matt. He Lead the People, things that he's writing. I just always appreciate your take on things. So I'd love to hear from you. What's a people metric, a people-centered number that you really believe or gauge that you really believe leaders should be paying attention to during disruptive change that maybe is overlooked, unknown, or is just simply your favorite because it's so informative?
Yeah, I think that there are numbers we have at our fingertips that we need to look at in a new way. So as an example, traditional employee engagement scores, those are things we've collected for a long, long time. But I think understanding the nature of engagement and understanding what's happening inside of organizations. I'll give you an example, Mo. What I have started to observe is that there is what I call a misattribution taking place. And what I mean is that as these pressures have caused drift, just naturally drift inside of human systems, then what we find is that employers and employees not getting along so well right now. I talked to a lot of employers who are saying, I want employees to return to office because I want to make sure that we're here. I want to see them. You know, what they're saying, they could be at home doing their laundry, like there's not a lot of trust there. They're going to get over on us. Okay. Then I talk to the employees and they say, well, they're just trying to bring in all this AI so they can make the spreadsheets and the bottom line look better. They're going to put us all out of work. They just don't want to have employees. And you're like, okay, neither of these things are universally true. And I think what it is a misattribution of the distance that's growing between us. So I'm interested in any people metrics that really measure that cohesiveness, that sort of connection, that, you know, these what I call these tight loops between us. That's what I'm interested in actually developing. Until we get to that point, I think having those employee engagement surveys and looking at them in the context of what's happening inside the organization. Are we introducing AI too quickly? Are we understanding that there might be generational differences that are causing us to pull apart a little bit if they go unnoticed? Other sorts of types of phenomena like that. Then I think all of a sudden the engagement scores that we see, which right now we've never seen them as low in terms of trust in leadership, in terms of managers who are disengaged because they're overwhelmed trying to hold it all together and being under siege themselves. I think it's a real call to action for us to look at those people metrics as you're teaching us to do in a powerful new way.
Yeah, and I think there's a piece of, even when we're looking at those engagement scores, Matt, if you're not doing that really consistently, because what's happening in the world, what happened to me on the way to work, what happened to me the last bad interaction I had or the last good interaction I had, those scores have a short shelf life. Right? It doesn't take much to erode trust. It takes a lot to get it back. And we don't exist in a bubble. What is happening out in the world and in our families, and we're bringing that to work too. So I think there's also this, with the pace of change that we've seen, and just really disruptive forces that we're seeing, really keeping a pulse on that is critical. If you're only doing this once a year, good luck with that. How are you feeling at work on January 28th of, you know what I mean?
Right.
How are you feeling at work 3 months ago? So
we've definitely got to match the data sampling, if you will, to match the pace of change. And right now, everything is changing so rapidly, we absolutely have to measure more quickly if we want to have a shot at having some glimpse of what reality is. And I think you're bringing up a really great point, Mo, which is that the nature of the pressure, the change, the challenge comes from outside the house and inside the house. And we ourselves can be a party to that as well. So when you think about what's happening outside, you're exactly right. When your employees, for example, let's say that you're a first-line manager and you have, a reasonable number of direct reports. Well, those direct reports are on LinkedIn and they're reading headlines, and those aren't altogether comforting things that they're reading. So they're going to bring in some of that external anxiety to the team dynamic, even if they don't say it. It's there. What about the inside pressures? Now, all of a sudden, if they're reading a company memo that says we've got to start using AI in certain ways or whatever the change might be, all of a sudden you're like, I didn't make that decision, but my team's being, caught up in it. So I need to be aware of the inside the house kind of things too. And then there's my own behavior. Am I actively taking an interest and listening deeply to my employees? Am I taking an interest in their lives outside of work, not just at work? Am I treating them more than transactionally? Am I providing them with the coaching, the belonging, the connection? If not, then my own leadership behaviors are going to accelerate that type of distancing, and it's going to make everything less efficient, more difficult, result, less positive as an experience goes. And some percentage of it is, I won't say it's unavoidable, but it's something we can do something about. If we recognize the way that the system is working, right? And if we take steps that will draw us closer together in a world of work and even just a world that's increasingly pulling us apart.
So then I'd love for you to make this really real. And I want you to give me the bad and the ugly first, and then the good and the beautiful. So where have you seen this go wrong, right? Where there was a disruptive change and the people side just went off the rails. And then where did you see it go right? And what was done?
Yeah, 100%. I think that the most common example that I'm seeing a lot of right now is this introduction of new technology. When we think about the AI has come on so quickly, and I feel like let's express a bit of empathy for executives who are now being pressured by their boards, by their peers, by the news about where are we with this AI thing. They're feeling a tremendous amount of pressure that they're watching entire businesses get completely overpowered by competitors who are taking advantage, disrupting business models, et cetera. So it's scary to be an executive right now, just as much as it's scary to be an employee. So let's extend a little empathy and compassion that way. When that happens, though, if we don't take our people with us and we move too quickly and we don't explain to them why, we don't offer them access to training, if we don't give them, the communication they need, the feedback, the space, the chance to listen to them and hear out their concerns and respond thoughtfully, if we don't do those things, we actually increase the fear and anxiety and we exacerbate the problem. And I think a lot of what I'm seeing now after a full year of AI investment is very sort of skeptical results. There's been a lot of activity, none of it, sort of very people-centric. I shouldn't say none of it, but not a lot of it. And I think that there's this question now about hanging over us about, is this stuff really going to change? Where are we really seeing the returns? And so it's almost like a real challenge that people feel like it's kind of hollow. The returns are hollow right now. So, and I think that's a major challenge. But in examples from everything ranging from healthcare to construction to beyond, I talk to clients all the time that are struggling with this. How do we bring our people back together to accomplish these operational objectives that we have? And it's a technical answer, but it's also a human-centric answer. And that's the part that's counterintuitive for people.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me about when it goes right.
Yeah.
And one that I'd love one that you've lived through, Matt, where it's, it was this, it felt like whether it's how many times do organizations get reorged or downsized or new strategy, new leaders, new tech, an acquisition, right? All of those, I'm bringing up kind of the big three in terms of how things can get blown up. When was one of those that you look back and you say, we did it right, and we centered the people, and here's what we did?
Yeah, I remember, this is going back a little bit, but I was working with a team of product leaders. So I was the leader of this team, had 3 different product managers reporting to me for different parts of our portfolio. And I had, out of instinct, I would say more than training, I had taken an active interest in them, their lives, beyond work. We were all distinct individuals, but we really had that cohesion that we were looking for. And it was a challenging environment because it's fast-paced, software growth, startup kind of mode. But at the same time, it felt like we were doing the people part right. We respected one another. We felt like we were in it together, despite the environmental. It was making us stronger together. And one day I was driving into work and I got hit by a driver who then sped off, hit and run. And I came into work and I was late for my meeting. They said, "Where you been?" I said, "Oh, you never believe what happened." I told them. They said, "Well, I got one of my employees there. His name's Bill. He said, I got a friend that owns a junkyard. You want to go see if we can do something about that busted up door of yours?" And I was broke, and this was early in my career. And I said, "Yeah, let's go." So I took the whole team. We piled into the car, and we went to the junkyard on this summer day, and we replaced the door, and then drove back to finish up our meeting. And it was just this wonderful sort of bonding moment. What do you think happened to the work, Mo? Whenever things got harder, what do you think happened when there's new changes, nimble, we got to lean on each other? that little experience, as offline as it sounds like it was, it really leveled up our commitment to one another, to be a team, to support one another. Yes, at work, beyond work, just period, right? The level of communication and feedback and support and I've got your back and all these types of things all went up. And so then as the company continued to evolve and some of the other teams experienced strain, we were insulated from that to an extent. And it mimicked a lot of what I experienced in the military, where we do a lot of the human stuff. You don't really see that on the outside as much because we know the danger of what we're headed into. So I think those are just some examples where team dynamics and a willingness to invest in cohesion, what I've come to call gravity, a way that really helps us to stick together and cling together despite the forces that would otherwise pull us apart, really paid off at that time. And I think it's possible for us all to do things that are fast and free. Hopefully they don't involve a hit and run, whoever's listening.
Junkyards.
No junkyard visits. But, I think the things that do help us stick together are fast and free if we have the awareness and the insight to do them.
You saw each other as whole human beings, right? And you experienced something as you were outside the conference room or you're outside, we're going to go find a door for this car, and right? And the bonding that happens to that. And I think that really is core to this, right? Is seeing the whole person, right? And team seeing, right? That we're three-dimensional. We have these lives outside work and in work, and how we respond and what our stressors are and what brings us joy, right? You have to scratch the surface, which is very scary for a lot of people.
Well, and I think that your point earlier, there was a time when we would try to compartmentalize, and you would go to work and work would fill certain needs that you had, and then you would have your home life. If you think about the classic Leave It to Beaver in the 50s, they would always have their family time and then they would have their work time. And nowadays, those boundaries have been completely dissolved. And people now are looking for things from work that they didn't used to. And employers are like, what? What do you mean you want belonging? And this is work. You're like, it doesn't work that way anymore. That might have been true for you 30 years ago. That's not how it is today. Or, the fact that sometimes your work and your life, for some of us that are, remote or hybrid, they all happen in the same room. And so it's like, whoa, holy cow. So, and I remember when the pandemic first happened, and, I had been married for quite a while. So, we had a house, but then people who were earlier in their career might have had roommates, and they're like trying to navigate work and
totally,
and everybody's just kind of adjusting, and you're seeing people on camera and you're like, oh my gosh, it humanized the whole experience of work, because before you just see just a slice of it. Now we were seeing everything. We were meeting pets and roommates and everything. And I think that overall it was delightful. It was the fact that I think that we destroyed some of the artificial barriers and some of the make-believe that work used to be. But with that came a lot of humanity that we weren't really prepared for. The average manager has not necessarily been trained in how to be a full human being leading other full human beings.
Totally.
And that shows up every day. And that's what causes us to actually exacerbate some of the distance between us inadvertently in so many ways.
So thinking about this, I'd love to hear a framework or a tool, something that really informs how you think about people and change and people and disruption. And then how listeners can apply that to their own work, Matt. Yeah.
There have been so many great psychology frameworks that we've looked at to try to help people through change. I think that examples about whether we're the stages of change where we're not quite ready to change, then we know we're ready to change, but we haven't started all the way through. We're in the middle of the change, and then the post-change, those types of things. Those were some early psychology views. I know that Keegan and Leahy came along with immunity to change as well. And I think that one of the favorite examples I got in terms of the philosophy, more than the specific framework, I was talking to the CEO of a Midwestern healthcare center, hospital system, and she had said that during the pandemic, there was this real need for the healthcare system to band together and to overcome this challenge. But when the threat went away, they went back to their old habits. And she said, what we don't need now is change management. We need change leadership. And for her, that was something altogether different. And I thought that's the types of frameworks we need. How do we actually lead change, not manage change? Those are two different things.
Very different.
Yeah. And I think that's why change is such an important thing, because it's only going to accelerate.
Oh, yeah.
I know that, I mentioned it, you mentioned that I have military background. I've also done work with emergency medicine, fire service, et cetera. These are what I call high stakes environments, right? These are like really serious things. Well, now, Mo, when I look around, they're all high stakes environments.
Yeah.
Every company's in a high stakes environment. It's all changing so fast. And there's so much sort of hanging in the balance for us that I think that using techniques from some of those more extreme environments is absolutely necessary now. So all that's super important.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, man. Like people keep saying, oh, when it goes back, we just need a break. We need a pause. We need a, ain't happening.
No, not happening. No,
Right,
there's
so
no
instead,
normal to
what's
go
this
back
change?
to. Yeah.
No, and what's the change? I love that. What's the change leadership, and how can we use some of the tools, processes, models from those high stakes? Right, they've been doing it forever. So looking to emergency medicine, right? Looking to, I think that is great. I'm going to take us into some rapid fire questions. So you took C2IQ.
I did.
I would love to know either what surprised you about your results, so that you're like, yep, that tracks.
Yeah. No, first of all, I really enjoyed it because it was brief. I tend to like brief assessments as opposed to long, onerous ones, which was fabulous. And it had a variety of different question formats. And I happen to have my report right here because I wanted to take a look. And I'll give you some things that jumped out at me as I was reviewing my report. And the first one was listed for me as a strength, which was adaptability. And the note I put for myself as I was reading it, I said, that's a new strength for me. That wasn't always the case. If I had taken this a long time ago, that would not have shown up as a strength. I had to learn self-coaching techniques and strategies, but I was very glad to see that all that hard work over, in my case, Mo, decades, has paid off. So it shows the fluidity of some of these things, that of how we show up for others. But another one was that showed up for a growth area for me was emotional regulation. And it talked about how if you're not able to demonstrate emotional regulation, you may show up with kind of these high stress moments, not quite how you'd like. And the note I put for myself there was downward spiral. Because if I experience that challenge of emotional regulation, sometimes I make the conditions worse because I either talk too fast or I cut people off or these sorts of things. So I thought that was a fun one. Yeah.
And I love, you just came to one of my favorite ones, like when I'm kind of in that spiral, the cutting people off, like let's just move really fast. Like I become a bulldozer, in those. That's not helpful.
Trust goes down, perceived safety goes down, the willingness to share ideas that I might need, that goes down. Like it makes the things worse. So I feel like that's great that that's a growth area for me and something that I'm working to develop. And the last one I'll share with you is another growth area for me, which is around empathy and listening. And it talks about how that it could take a little bit more effort right now. And the quote in here, it's easy to jump in with advice. And I thought, man, that nailed me because I get so focused sometimes on the solution, the problem, the metric, how do we solve it? I've always been rewarded and I've always taken pride in solving problems. But when you jump in with advice, you might actually be elongating the development of your team. And if you need a team of self-optimizers and you want to sort of coach them and guide them and help them come to a conclusion, you have to give up some control. But what you gain in the long run is capability of your team. Yeah. And so I thought that tendency to jump in with advice, how do you kind of hold on? There might be a time for advice, but it's not the default. And I thought that the report really nailed that in me.
I think what's interesting, right, is again, these are skills that can be developed, and the muscles that we have to use are different when we're an individual contributor versus a manager versus an executive. And I'm super glad you found value. Again, rapid fire. What about the human side of disruption and people? What makes or breaks it, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's awareness. I think right now we just haven't really taken the opportunity to understand what's happening, to us. And I don't say that with any judgment. It's not good or bad. The fact that we have Amazon and Instacart, the fact that we are spread out from our families, like all these things, they're completely natural. Nothing wrong with that. but we do have to understand what it's doing in terms of the perceived separation and these entropic things that I've been talking about. So I think that's the number one, is it would almost be like playing a game without understanding the rules. How frustrating would that be? Like if you didn't take the time to understand the rules of the game and you were just like disappointed at every turn, yeah, be like, you know what I think you should do? I think you should learn the rules. So I feel like that's why awareness is probably a really important first step for us, is just to understand what's happening to us. We don't have to take a long time doing it. We don't have to marinate on it. We don't have to ruminate on it. But I do think if we really want to be successful and show up at our best as leaders and serve our teams and actually have high-performing businesses and community groups and families and relationships, period, we got to understand the rules of the game. And the game has changed.
Oh, I love that. Okay. Where can people find your work, Matt? And I said this to y'all earlier. Matt is somebody that every conversation we have, every article that he writes, right? Every single thing, there's always an aha for me. So listen to what he has to say in terms of where you can find him.
Well, I appreciate that so much, Mo. But easiest place for me is LinkedIn. If you come to LinkedIn, I'm pretty active over there on the platform and really enjoy sharing my thoughts and making new connections. So that's a great place. That'd be the number one answer for me. And as you mentioned, for people who love podcasts, do have the Lead the People podcast. That's a lot of fun. And I would love to just hear from people.
Awesome. Matt, thank you. I appreciate you sharing the gift of your knowledge, your wisdom, your experience. And I knew it was going to be a great conversation. It was. Deep appreciation, my friend.
Thank you, Mo.
Hey, you made it to the end of the episode. You are ride or die. Thank you again for joining us. If you like the podcast and want to stay connected, please hit subscribe. These are video podcasts, so join us on YouTube for the best experience of the show. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people who are committed to human-centered change. See you on the next episode.